Hearing that, her husband squinted his eyes and glanced at his wife, frowning as he reminded her, "Hey, why are you speaking so harshly?" He then added, "No matter how you say it, they are still our neighbors." Upon hearing this, the girl raised her voice to shout back, her eyes wide with astonishment as she turned to him and yelled, "Huh? You are my husband, and you're defending someone from outside." Next, a loud honking sound came from outside. Upon hearing it, the girl covered her ears, glanced outside, and opened her mouth wide to shout in dissatisfaction, "Ah!" She then added an insult, "Who is making all that noise? Is it the nerve endings? It must be that poor bunch of neighbors trying to take revenge on me." Then she looked out the window, holding her head and yelling in exasperation, "Is it just about stomping on a few oranges? Later, I will call a truck to completely block their yard." Immediately after, a convoy of vehicles passed by on the street. Her husband was taken aback and exclaimed in panic, "Wait, that license plate is—" He interrupted himself. Then he shouted loudly while looking at the first vehicle in the convoy outside, "Dong 001. This is the provincial director's vehicle." Immediately after, he quickly approached, gradually heading towards the glass door, raising his hand to stroke his chin, his face filled with astonishment as he shouted once again, "The provincial director personally comes, blowing the whistle 9 times to celebrate the appearance of the dragon. The provincial director must have come because of the ascending dragon martial poinsettia." Next to him, his wife was also in shock, her face stiff, eyes wide as she looked at her husband with a silly smile, shouting back, "What? The ascending dragon martial poinsettia this year belongs to Baihe City, and it's even in our district," she asked back. Then she turned to look at the convoy below and commented, "This truly is ancestral blessings." Then she confirmed, "This time we must build a relationship." Haha. By the side, a convoy was parked in front of Lu Sheng's house. Lindsay also looked out in amazement, and then with a panic-stricken expression, he asked, "King, what is going on? Why is there a whole terrifying convoy stopping in front of our house?" The girl turned her head out as well, still holding a lantern, and confusingly replied, "I don't know either." Soon after, the 3 people, Lu Sheng's father, mother, and younger sister, were quickly invited out to meet the people in a car. Right after that, Head Pignan bowed his head and stepped out, speaking first, "I'm really sorry." He then added, "I'm sorry for coming without prior notice." Seeing this, the 3 people looked at him in confusion. As soon as he stepped out of the car, Head Pignan stood upright, smiled kindly at them, and asked, "Excuse me, is this the home of Lu Sheng, ascending dragon martial poinsettia?" This is Head Pignan, the provincial governor of Dongning, master of martial arts. Meanwhile, the driver was still standing by the open door, eyes closed and head bowed. Upon hearing this, Lindsay quickly widened his eyes and shouted in panic, "Ascending dragon! How could it be ascending dragon martial poinsettia?" Behind him, Lu King also looked shocked, wide-eyed, and holding her face, while Lu Sheng's mother smiled brightly and covered her mouth in surprise. On the other side, the female neighbor quickly froze, her eyes wide as she shouted towards Lu Sheng's house. "What? Ascending dragon martial poinsettia can't possibly be the son of that family." The girl quickly held her head, grimacing and widening her eyes, shouting, "Ha ha, aha, aha." She then mumbled in panic, "I'm done for. This time I'm in big trouble. What have I done?" Meanwhile, Lu Sheng was still sitting in his room, cross-legged, with his head raised to regulate his breath, hands resting on his knees. He then looked at his arms and stated his observation. Cleaning the essence within, purifying his body, Lu Sheng's body began to show brown streaks. He then concluded in his thoughts, "After attaining the next technique of the immortal golden body stage 2, a poor physique is gradually starting to strengthen once again." At the same time, Lu Sheng was wiping himself while getting up from the bed. Shortly after, his phone buzzed with a message notification and the screen lit up. After that, Lu Sheng opened the chat screen to find King. She messaged, "Older brother, you've ranked first in the country. Ascending dragon martial poinsettia, ascending dragon." Then she sent an animated image and continued to urge, "Older brother, there are 2 people at home. Why haven't you gotten up yet?" Next, she reminded him once again, "Older brother, the provincial director is waiting for you. Why are you making the director wait for you to wake up?" Hearing this, Lu Sheng was also surprised and widened his eyes. As he read the message, he wiped his sweat and shouted in his heart, "The provincial director." Then he reaffirmed to himself, "In my own home." Next, Lu Sheng closed his eyes, regulated his breathing, and confirmed in his thoughts, "Let me see." Immediately, a purple network formed in his mind as he looked around the house, his hand gripping the phone tightly. Below, 3 family members and 3 other people were sitting in the living room. Seeing this, Lu Sheng also voiced his thoughts about the aura. Is that President Xiao? Then he further assessed that beside him was another person with a similar blood energy level, a 6th level master. Next, he quickly turned to the person with the fiery red aura and noted, and this person. Lu Sheng paused slightly and confirmed, the entire body's blood energy is like a furnace. Even a 6th level expert seems like just a speck of carbon dust scattered around a roaring flame. Right after that, he turned his face to glance up at him. Lu Sheng was startled and shouted, "This is the master." He Pingnan also looked back at Lu Sheng with a bright smile. Haha. Then he remarked, "It seems that our ascending dragon martial poinsettia has awakened." Next to him, President Xiao also looked at him in confusion, and Lu Sheng's mother shot a puzzled glance as well. Soon after, Lu Sheng began to descend the stairs. The crowd quickly turned their attention to Lu Sheng, and then he calmly placed his hand on the railing and addressed them. "I sincerely apologize for making you all wait." Seeing this, He Pingnan also looked at Lu Sheng, furrowing his brow, smiling thoughtfully as he assessed, well, at such a young age he already harbors a powerful aura. Next to him, Xiao Yuhu was also smiling happily at Lu Sheng. Then, He Pingnan observed the strong aura emanating from Lu Sheng and added, "It's like the sunrise breaking through the morning mist." Meanwhile, Lu Sheng maintained a calm demeanor as he approached them. He further commented, "It truly is difficult not to feel a sense of profound mountains and deep rivers." Next, Lin Zi quickly approached his son, placing a hand on Lu Sheng's shoulder. His other hand reached out towards He Pingnan with a smile, his eyes squinting with joy as he introduced, "Style Sheng, you're finally awake. This is the provincial director of Dongning, He Pingnan." Then he pointed to the person next to him and added, "And this is the mayor of Baihe City." Finally, he pointed to Xiao Yuhu, who was smiling at him, and added, "President Xiao Yuhu, you know him." Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng quickly smiled and approached He Pingnan, extending his hand to shake his. He greeted, "Provincial Director, hello." He Pingnan also extended his hand with a friendly demeanor, calmly looking at him as he responded, "Haha, hello, Student Lu." Immediately after, everyone quickly sat down. Lu Sheng sat opposite He Pingnan. He looked at him and stated, "This visit is primarily to congratulate Student Lu Sheng." Then he added, "On achieving the top score nationally in the Ascending Dragon Martial Poinsettia of this year's college entrance examination." Hearing this, Lin Zi beside him looked at him in confusion and asked, "Has the college entrance examination results come out already?" Hearing that, He Pingnan earnestly replied, "Basically, the system has been completed, only the ranking achievements are not finished yet." He further confirmed, "However, it is certain that student Lu Sheng ranks first." Upon hearing this, Lin Zi's face lit up with excitement as he stared wide-eyed at him and jumped up from his seat. Behind him, Lu King also looked shocked, gaping at her brother. On the other side, their mother raised her hand to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with happiness as she smiled. In the middle, Lu Sheng remained calm, listening as he continued. He Pingnan added, "Moreover, this is without including the scores from cultural classes and various bonus points." Finally, he stated, "If we wait until the system calculates all the scores, it is highly likely that there will be a top scholar with the best competitive exam results in history." Immediately after, he reached out and the secretary behind him quickly bowed and presented a box. He Pingnan glanced at it, smiled calmly, and confirmed, "I just received the news and came here right away to meet student Lu Sheng." He then added, "At the same time, on behalf of our Dongning province, we will present some corresponding rewards to the student who ranked first in Dongning." Right after that, he opened the box. Inside was a silver card and a piece of real estate paper. He Pingnan confirmed to them, "This is a $50 million reward. Although it's not much, it's a gesture from the province towards student Lu Sheng." Then he added, "And this is a house over 400 square meters located in the center of Dongning province. Although it's not as large as student Lu Sheng's house, the location is beautiful, with many professional martial arts support facilities around, making it very suitable for a martial artist to live and cultivate." The whole Lu Sheng family stared wide-eyed into the box, speechless. Lu Sheng, along with his mother and sister, also leaned in to look inside. After that, Lu Sheng's mother quickly took the box and smiled as she closed it. He Pingnan also looked at Lu Sheng and confirmed, "Student Lu is currently already at the 6th level martial artist rank." Behind Lu King, hearing his brother's words, stared in astonishment, jaw dropped. Lu Sheng, however, turned to look at him calmly. He confirmed, "You can choose any martial saint from across the country." Then he asked, "Lu Sheng, have you thought about where you want to choose?" Hearing this, Lu Sheng quickly looked at him and replied, "I have decided." With a straightforward expression, he looked at him and confirmed, "The capital of martial saints." Immediately after, He Pingnan quickly took out a letter of introduction, closing his eyes with a smile. Behind him, the secretary respectfully placed the letter in his hands. He Pingnan added, "I think so too." He then supplemented, coincidentally, I also have a letter of introduction from a martial saint that I need to give to you. Next, he waved his hand and revealed 7 red invitation cards with green letters, looking at him with an excited smile, adding, moreover, all 7 are martial saints. Finally, he stated, I don't have any biases, so I won't say much. Student Lu Sheng, you can choose for yourself. Seeing this, Lu King beside him was also astonished, wide-eyed, and speechless, internally exclaiming in disbelief, the martial saints, revered by countless martial arts students across the country, can be freely chosen, finally exclaiming in amazement, is this a scene from a comic or a plot from a novel? Lu Sheng sat upright, hands on his knees, staring blankly at the letter in front of him, unsure of what to say. Then, Lu Sheng quickly gathered the letters of introduction together, using his other hand to organize the other letters. He Ping Nan observed his selection with slight surprise. Soon after, Lu Sheng held up a letter from the messy pile and said, this one. He then interrupted himself, confirming, this is it. Looking at the label on the outside of the letter, his eyes sparkled as he confirmed, the 7th martial saint. Hearing this, He Ping Nan was also a bit taken aback. With his eyes wide open, he glanced at Lu Sheng in surprise. Forcing a smile, he thought to himself, I thought Lu Sheng would consider it carefully, but I didn't expect the decision to be like this. Such a unique style. Next, he also smiled, gesturing to put the letter away while closing his eyes and stating, the 7 martial saints are all built on the heritage of martial arts. Although the 7th martial saint may not stand out as much, the quality of the instructors here is not inferior to those of the other 6 martial saints. He continued to confirm, the course assignments of the martial saints are also more dangerous, so he will need a suitable cold weapon. Beside him, he also held the letter, listening to what he said. Then he presented his golden business card in front of Lu Sheng and stated, once student Lu Sheng has chosen a significant cold weapon, feel free to call me anytime. Hearing this, Lu Sheng was a bit surprised and stared blankly, looking down at the shimmering business card, his expression somewhat dazed. He Ping Nan confirmed further, for cold weapons below level 6, I will personally select one for you as a congratulatory gift for student Lu Sheng's excellent results. Hearing this, Lu Sheng quickly took the card, looked at it with wide eyes and a smile while commenting, a level 6 cold weapon, it must not be cheap. Then he reminded himself reluctantly, but refusing the goodwill of the provincial director, who is also a master martial artist, and then justifying it in my heart would be extremely impolite. After that, Lu Sheng confirmed with him. Then thank you, Director Ha. Following this, he and the others quickly stood up, their smiles warm and friendly. He Ping Nan stood up, clasped his hands, and confirmed. All right, since you've come to my house, I won't trouble you further. Mainly because I, Ping Nan, heard that a mighty dragon is about to appear in Dongning province, so I'm truly excited and can hardly contain myself, adding, I hope everyone can understand. On the other side, Lu Sheng and his family also stood up. Hearing him, Lindsay extended his hand with a cheerful smile and confirmed, not a trouble at all. Lu Sheng and his family stood at the gate waving goodbye as He Ping Nan's convoy left. Right after that, Lindsay looked towards Lu Sheng, smiling with squinted eyes and frowning, his hands clenched as he shouted happily, ha ha ha, it really is the family name of our ancestors. The family name of our ancestors, our Lu family never expected to have such a day. Immediately after, he called out to his wife, urging her, wife, hurry to the market and buy some things, we will hold a celebration dinner tonight. Next to him, Lu King was also excitedly holding up a roll of red ribbon. Meanwhile, his mother, hearing this, turned around and ran into the house, not forgetting to respond. Lu Sheng, seeing them so happy, also looked on and smiled gently. In another place, a man looked at his file inside, then made an observation. Quite interesting. Shortly after, someone next to him glanced at him and asked, oh, is there something that you find interesting? Then he exclaimed, that's really impressive. The person standing in the shadows also propped his hands up, tilting his head as he held Lu Sheng's file, and remarked, perhaps this year will not be like the previous ones. This is a martial saint from somewhere. A few days later, Lu Sheng's classmates looked at him, all with tears in their eyes. Lu Sheng and his classmates celebrated together for passing the competitive exam and said their goodbyes to each other, especially Liu Kai-ming, who was crying loudly, tears streaming down his face. Quickly arriving before departure, bidding farewell to family and stepping into a new journey, Lu Sheng hugged his parents and younger sister goodbye at the airport. Lindsay looked at Lu Sheng, frowning, both sad and a bit proud. Next, Lu Sheng swiftly boarded the plane. He reached up to place his luggage in the overhead compartment and then reflected in his thoughts. The 7th Martial Saint is also the next school I will enroll in. The main reason is because Lu Sheng paused. Then, while storing his luggage, he squinted and continued reflecting in his mind. The 7th Martial Saint has a complete Martial Saint inheritance system, and there is also a unique martial saint tower. After that, as Lu Sheng sat in his seat, he suddenly saw someone familiar and was a bit startled. His thoughts were interrupted as he considered that the seventh martial saint he chose was established 57 years ago, and he acknowledged that the founder was Tanjong Yu, one of the three martial saints currently in the Dragon Nation. Next, he recalled that Tanjong Yu became a martial saint only a little over 60 years ago, and his current age is over 100. He imagined the figure standing in a painting along with the tower and the large sword. This is the seventh martial saint creating a new paradigm. Immediately after, Lu Sheng further noted, "It is said that the lifespan of a martial saint can easily exceed 300 years, far beyond the lifespan of ordinary humans." Next, Lu Sheng confirmed, "The martial saints of this entire world are relatively young." Thinking of this, Lu Sheng raised his hand to stroke his chin, closing his eyes and frowning while imagining an old turtle with white hair holding a sword and making a judgment in his mind, resembling a figure of immortality from mythology. Lu Sheng also remembered that throughout the history of the Dragon Nation, there were a total of 9 martial saints, a path of dragons paved by those before with countless martial arts practiced. Then Lu Sheng added with a sense of regret, "Unfortunately, over 100 years ago, many martial saint-level experts perished in battles against strange creatures. These large, strange creatures attacked buildings and people, turning the battlefield into a bloodbath." Lu Sheng remarked further, "Some also died in the conflicts between nations, where skilled individuals fought and killed each other." Lu Sheng further stated, "Various tactics led to both sides losing countless martial saints. The elite martial saints of humanity perished due to internal depletion," he said. "A large, powerful green dragon fought against a white lion." Lu Sheng commented, "The Dragon Nation and the Lion Nation's struggle for supremacy in the martial arts world truly troubles the heart." As for the result he preferred not to mention, Lu Sheng interrupted, "Just return the result, no explanation needed, nothing else." The Martial Saint Tower was built after the war as the Dragon Nation aimed to perfectly recreate each martial saint in their different states. The Martial Saint Tower represents the highest level of martial arts in the Dragon Nation combined with advanced technology. A towering structure with cutting-edge technology was born in the heart of the city. Lu Sheng commented on the tower. Those entering will face challenges based on difficulty. He imagined the levels of the tower as the growth stages of a human. The first level is a child, the second level is a teenager, and the final level is an elderly person leaning on a cane, while the conqueror stands outside holding a sword at level 1. Lu Sheng further confirmed the more levels one passes, the more likely they are to encounter a martial saint and even be accepted into a sect by them. Next, he remembered Than with the bright golden halo, watching the conqueror with the sword below. Returning to reality, he recalled the image of himself wielding a sword as he entered the martial city, causing him to wince and pout, thinking of the digital inheritance books, and shouted in his heart, "Even though I don't care about the martial saint disciples, because I already have many inheritances left by level 11 powerhouses." Then he further confirmed the cultivation methods in his mind: water crystal visualization technique, natural breathing method, divine illumination King Sutra. Finally, he voiced his thoughts, "With all that, I haven't even finished my cultivation, let alone these small level 9 martial saint inheritances." Right after that, Lu Sheng looked at the overall score table with categories. Must train 1, must train 2, must train 3, and a bunch of other items. His face tightened and he began to sweat as he thought that if it weren't for Dragon Nation's strict requirements regarding the key focus on cultivating martial arts talents, it would ultimately be confirmed that he had to have enough corresponding training points in university to be allowed on the battlefield. Returning to reality, Lu Sheng spoke hopefully. "I went directly to report to Du Fa Yi and then reassessed. Well, it's okay." Behind him, a girl was also packing her luggage, looking somewhat troubled. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng smiled, lost in thought as he gazed out the door, internally shouting, "By then, I'll earn a few more mission points to quickly reach sufficient points and finally confirm. Maybe in about a year, I'll graduate as a 7th martial saint." Suddenly, a familiar voice called Lu Sheng, "Lu Sheng." She bent down to look at him, smiling brightly and cheerfully, asking Lu Sheng, "What a coincidence. Are you flying to the capital today too?" The truth of this coincidence is that King's younger sister sent a message to Yang Yan. Lu King sent a notification. "Older brother's flight is at noon tomorrow, then cheer her on." "It's okay, Sister Yang Yan, be brave. You gave up Dong University to come to the capital for my older brother." Then, excitedly igniting the fuse, "What is there to be afraid of? Go for it, future sister-in-law." Returning to reality, she quickly sat down next to Lu Sheng, then smiled brightly. Lu Sheng, seeing her shy smile, confirmed, "What a coincidence." Then the two looked at each other and smiled. The conversation hit a dead end, and Lu Sheng, seeing this, also moved away from her, shrinking a bit. After that, Lu Sheng quickly regained his composure and glanced at her, inwardly wondering why is she here. Meanwhile, she smiled at Lu Sheng, full of joy and sincerity. He, noticing this, quickly averted his gaze, avoiding her, his face showing awkwardness as he forced a smile, internally screaming, no. Could it be another wife? 2 hours later, the plane quickly landed. Lu Sheng and Yang Yan quickly got off the plane. He was pulling the suitcase ahead, looking around. Behind him, Yang Yan was also excitedly pulling her suitcase while smiling. Seeing this, Lu Sheng made a conclusion in his mind. Indeed, the capital is vibrant, to the point that it can be considered prosperous. Right after that, a person jogging at lightning speed with headphones on zoomed by. Lu Sheng, while watching her leap over the high lamp posts, ran and voiced his thoughts. Perhaps base 1359 looked like this in its glorious dreams before being invaded. Below, he commented, even the janitors outside the wall are skilled at hiding their talents. At the top of the building, someone was cleaning the windows without needing climbing gear. At Jinghe University, a crowd of students was entering. Then, Lu Sheng turned to Yang Yan beside him, smiled, and confirmed with her. We've arrived at Jinghe University. I'll get you registered first, and then I will report at Marshall Saint. Next to her, Yang Yan also blushed, too shy to look directly at Jinghe, and timidly replied, aha. Then the two quickly rolled their suitcase into the school. Seeing this, Yang Yan also began to imagine. This feels like a couple of college students going to register for classes together. After that, she confirmed, it would be great if I could attend the same school as Lu Sheng. At the school gate, two youths, one with brown gel hair and the other with blonde hair, were teasing female students. Suddenly, the blonde one looked towards him and Yang Yan. Immediately, his gaze landed on her, smiling brightly alongside Lu Sheng, who was also laughing and talking, and he shouted in admiration, oh shit, what a stunner. Then his eyes lit up like hearts as he clenched his fist and shouted in confirmation, no one better compete with me, this classmate is mine. Beside him, a guy with slick back hair quickly shot him a disdainful glance, narrowing his eyes as he remarked, Dan, are you crazy? Right after, the slick-haired guy quickly walked towards Yang Yan, smiling as he extended his hand to greet her. Hello, classmate. Are you here to enroll at Jinghe? Let me help you with the registration. Meanwhile, the blonde guy quickly stood behind her, smiling as he offered, ha ha ha, let me help you with your luggage. Seeing this, Yang Yan felt awkward pulling her luggage while pausing to look at them. Then, Lu Sheng quickly picked up two suitcases, placing them in the hands of the blonde guy, causing him to widen his eyes in shock. Behind them, the slick-haired guy also glanced back at Lu Sheng, who was smiling cheerfully while confirming, sorry to trouble you both. As for Yang Yan, she quickly stepped back, somewhat flustered as she observed Lu Sheng's actions. Hearing that, the blonde also stretched out his hand to take the luggage, scrunching his face in confusion as he looked at Lu Sheng and asked back, excuse me, are you also a new student from Jinghe like us? Seeing that the guy wasn't afraid of him, Lu Sheng also acknowledged in his heart. During this time, he had learned to conceal his overflowing vitality within his body and then confirmed it himself. It seemed that ordinary people couldn't sense it. Next, Lu Sheng quickly crossed his arms, smiled at the guy with an indifferent expression, and replied, no, we are classmates, just here to help her register. Meanwhile, Yang Yan stood behind Lu Sheng, smiling awkwardly as she looked at the blonde. Hearing this, the blonde guy raised the suitcase in his hand and laughed, winking at his burly friend beside him and whispering, ha ha, looking at that classmate's demeanor, he must have a crush on him. Upon hearing this, the young man quickly bent down, clenched his fist, glanced at him, and smiled while whispering, good thing we aren't in the same school. We benefit more by being close. Then the burly guy quickly smiled, glanced towards Lu Sheng, pointed at the school's building, and proudly introduced, our place may only be second-rate, but all conditions are based on the first-rate Marshall Saint standard. He then added, we have all kinds of training rooms in the school, and the martial artist road is very close. Finally, he shouted his conclusion. There are 3 opportunities every month to enter the Marshall Saint Tower. You won't regret coming to Jinghe. Okay? Hearing that, Lu Sheng squinted at him, raising an eyebrow and asking back, can an ordinary Marshall Saint also enter the Marshall Saint Tower? Beside them, Yang Yan looked over in confusion. The other person quickly placed his hands on his hips, raised his head high, closed his eyes, and proudly confirmed. Of course, the Marshall Saint Tower is a treasure of the Dragon Nation. How could it be restricted only to the students of Marshall Saints? Next to him, the blonde guy, holding a suitcase and also raising his head, tilted his face towards the burly man to add, not only ordinary martial saints like us, but even external martial artists can enter the Marshall Saint Tower as long as they have the approval of the Martial Artists Association. He concluded that the process is just a bit complicated. Then he imagined the scene of his school when entering the tower requiring a validator, contrasting it to a situation where it doesn't require one. Students of martial saints just have a slight advantage. They don't need any approval and can go in whenever they want. Next, the blonde guy quickly rubbed his hands, stepped towards Yang Yan, his face beaming as he reminded her. Little sister, let me tell you the first rule when you go to Jinghe in the eastern area of our university. You can provoke anyone. He added, there will be people in the school to help you, so there won't be any fights. Hearing this, Yang Yan next to him flinched away and looked at him in surprise, her eyes wide, dot open. Next, his face quickly darkened, the look in his eyes filled with warning and fear. He pointed to the sky and whispered, but absolutely do not anger the people of the 7th Martial Saint. Remember, do not provoke the people of the 7th Martial Saint. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng also looked puzzled and rubbed his chin, his eyes wide open as he asked, why? Hearing this, he quickly stood up straight, a bit startled. Finally, he gritted his teeth and glared at Lu Sheng, feeling frustrated as he shouted internally, why is this brat here again? Don't interfere with me and this girl talking. He then regained his composure and explained to Lu Sheng, because the students of the 7th Martial Saint are all insane. Those people have strange creature missions as soon as they enroll. The blonde boy recalled the intense fights of those people and added, it starts with bloodshed. If they fight, someone might get killed. Then he shouted to add, moreover, their strength is beyond discussion. Each one is terrifyingly strong. Finally, he pointed at Lu Sheng, his face grim. Clenching his teeth and frowning in annoyance, he asked in a low voice, got it? Hearing this, Lu Sheng smiled brightly, not paying attention to the discomfort in front of him, and confirmed, I understand. Immediately after that, they arrived at the campus where a crowd had gathered and a sign indicating the direction read, freshman registration area. Next, Lu Sheng turned around, raised his hand to his ear as if holding a phone, with his other hand tucked in his pocket, smiling at Yang Yan to confirm, all right, I'll take you here. If you need anything, just contact me by phone. He emphasized, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Hearing this, she also looked at Lu Sheng happily and shyly, nodded with a smile, and said, Then Lu Sheng turned and left, while Yang Yan stood waving behind him. Seeing them like that, the tall guy with brown hair commented, looks like we have no chance now, right? Next to him, the blonde ran over and reminded, use any means to get what you want, got it? Meanwhile, the burly guy covered his face with his hand to look towards Lu Sheng, grimacing as he stated, damn, that kid is really too arrogant. Hearing this, the blonde next to him gritted his teeth and rolled his eyes in agreement. Exactly, and he talks about contacting him. Who does he think he is? Immediately after that, he bounced over to Yang Yan, pushed the suitcase, bent down, and asked her, classmate, which university is your friend registering at with such arrogance? While she remained frowning, watching Lu Sheng's figure. Finally, she coldly glared at him and spoke, 7th Martial Saint. Hearing this, the two young men quickly froze, their faces full of confusion as they stared with mouths agape at Yang Yan and exclaimed, what? Then, while driving 2 suitcases, she arrogantly closed her eyes and raised her head to add, that's right, he comes from Baihe City, and his name is Lu Sheng. Upon hearing this, the 2 young men immediately stiffened and ultimately, filled with fear, they looked at each other with pale faces as they simultaneously uttered in dread, Lu Sheng. Then they screamed while holding their heads, he is this year's Ascending Dragon Marshal Poinsettia. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng continued to smile as he walked towards his school. Lu Sheng's suitcase quickly rolled to the school gate. After that, he stopped, looked up, and calmly confirmed as twilight fell, I'm here, this is... He interrupted himself, then glanced at the bright golden sign at the entrance. Standing in front of the large gate, he shouted, 7th Martial Saint. Inside was the school campus, and outside stood Lu Sheng with his suitcase, gazing silently. Next, Lu Sheng smiled again, his brows furrowing with determination as he looked at the tower in the center, privately commenting, what a remarkable 7th Martial Saint. The massive wooden tower presented a magnificent atmosphere before his eyes. In the mind of a master, there are rivers and mountains. In the heart of a martial saint, there is heaven and earth. Even if it was just to expand his knowledge, this journey to the university was worth the effort. As soon as he stepped in, he saw a small booth with a long table and a few people. Beside it was a sign indicating the place to report for new students. Lu Sheng handed in his card and asked, is this where new students are received? The 3 people there, consisting of 2 women and 1 man, looked up at Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng added, I'm here to register. Hearing this, a blonde girl behind quickly rushed over, took Lu Sheng's introduction letter with a smile, placed her hand on the table, and excitedly asked, oh, you're a newcomer? Just give me the notice and I'll help you check it. The person sitting at the table also looked at her with wide eyes, and Lu Sheng had no time to react as the letter was snatched away. Upon seeing his letter, the blonde girl's eyes widened in shock as she exclaimed, "Oh, it's finally confirmed, Ascending Dragon Martial Poinsettia of this year." The girl beside them saw this and turned to look, exclaiming in astonishment, "It's truly a rare sight." They focused intently on Lu Sheng's introduction letter, then began discussing. "This is the first time our 7th martial saint has recruited a top scholar, and moreover, he's a rare handsome one." Hearing this, the man behind who was cleaning his weapon stiffened, stopping his actions. He narrowed his eyes at them, without saying a word, frowning slightly in discomfort. Next, he quickly jumped up, making a loud noise that startled all 3 of them. Immediately after, he landed on the table in front of Lu Sheng. A loud sound echoed. Lu Sheng also quietly looked over, showing no expression. Next, he squatted down, the sword resting on his shoulder, a proud expression on his face. Frowning as he looked at Lu Sheng and emanating an orange-red aura, he asked, "Is that you?" Lu Sheng remained calm, gripping the straps of his bag with a very tranquil expression as he looked at him, exuding a green aura. The man then asked, "Your name is Lu Sheng, right?" Hearing this, Lu Sheng smiled broadly, his eyes full of friendliness as he confirmed, "That's right, it's me." He then asked him, "What's the matter?" Seeing this, the man smirked, glaring at Lu Sheng with a fierce demeanor, quickly brandishing his sword, his eyes flashing. Then, a fiery sword slashed towards Lu Sheng. He knelt on the table with one foot, while the other foot remained on the ground, and Lu Sheng stood still, remaining completely calm. The strike aimed at Lu Sheng's shoulder left no marks, feeling like a mosquito bite. Lu Sheng's expression remained calm as he smiled at the other person, with the sword still resting on his shoulder. In this situation, the senior holding the sword was also taken aback, a bit stunned, his eyes wide and eyebrows furrowed in surprise as he looked at Lu Sheng. Then he tilted his head toward the tip of his sword and said, "You should head straight in that direction." Seeing this, Lu Sheng tilted his head to look in the direction of the sword's tip. Next, the other person lifted his foot and stood on the table while adding, "The path is clearly marked, so it's easy to find the student dormitory." Right after that, Lu Sheng quickly turned his head back, closed his eyes while walking and confirmed, "Okay, thank you." Leaving behind a scene of shock, the sword-wielding person and the 2 girls were staring at Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng waved goodbye to them without turning back. Next, the blonde girl standing also placed a hand on her chin and eagerly watched Lu Sheng's retreating figure, then remarked, "Oh, his demeanor is stable and calm, and also this aura." She further confirmed, "He is indeed more outstanding than the senior class. It would be great if he were my teammate." Meanwhile, the senior with the sword stood up straight, resting the sword on his shoulder, one hand on his hip as he watched Lu Sheng's direction, furrowing his brows and asking the 2 others, "Does anyone know his score in the competitive exam?" The bespectacled girl sitting was checking her phone, her eyes wide with surprise as she confirmed, "I'm checking now." Finally concluding, "There's nothing, can't find it." Next, she was both surprised and looked at the screen while shouting, "But I've heard that his blood gas index has broken through to level 6 already." Hearing this, the senior quickly furrowed his brows and glanced over at her. The blonde senior beside him was also startled, his eyes wide and trembling. Meanwhile, the girl in glasses in the middle was still confirming further and moreover, breaking quite a few records. It was highly likely that he was the strongest top scholar ever. Seeing this, the senior quickly frowned, squinted his eyes at Lu Sheng, and smiled with great interest, chuckling. He then confirmed, "Is that so?" Then later, during the self-confirmation, there will definitely be a good show to watch. As for Lu Sheng, he was carefully observing his surroundings while holding a suitcase and concluded in his mind, "Oh, a capital that has such a large area, truly worthy of being a martial saint." Then he found it a bit puzzling and wondered quietly, where have all the students gone? Suddenly, a loud call rang out, "Hey, classmate in front." A chubby boy ran up to Lu Sheng, excitedly smiling as he said, "Ha ha ha, finally I get to meet someone." Lu Sheng turned to look at him. The boy then asked Lu Sheng, "Is this your first day here to register?" He quickly introduced himself, "My name is Lin Zhe, and I'm also a new student." Then he raised his hand to scratch his head, looking at Lu Sheng with an awkward smile, and asked, "Can you take me to the student dormitory?" He further explained, "I'm directionally challenged by nature. I've been wandering around for half a day and still can't find it." Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng kindly looked over and confirmed with him, "Sure, I know the way there." He then urged, "This place is very spacious. Let's go. You have the same name as my dad. Haha." Next, the 2 men pulled their luggage in front of the crowd. Lindsay quickly smiled with joy and remarked, "Ha! We've finally found a place to stay, and this place is incredibly spacious." Beside him, Lu Sheng calmly asked with Yi Wen, "Ha! Why are so many people standing in front of the entrance? Is something going on?" In front of them was a group of students grimacing. Suddenly, someone flew into the air, followed by shouts warning, "Hey, hey, hey, danger, get out of the way." Lindsay and Lu Sheng also looked up in confusion, and Lindsay said, "What?" Moments later, the person crashed back down to the ground with a painful cry. Up. The people around him looked on in shock with wide eyes. Soon after, someone clapped from above and a proud voice said, "Not bad, not bad." He commented, "Zhu Xiaoming, this year's martial arts champion of Nanjiang province, right?" Meanwhile, a person who had fallen was still surrounded, gritting his teeth and frowning as he sat up. Next, a young man with lion-like golden hair quickly clenched his fist, his other hand on his hip, as he looked at his fist with a smug smile and said, "Very impressive. You're the only one in this crowd who's been able to take 2 of my blows." He added, "Keep it up. If you break through a little more, you might just survive." By the door, a long-haired person stood sipping milk tea and watching the scene with a smile, his foot propped up against the door. A nervous green-haired boy furrowed his brows as he looked at his friend beside him and asked, "Hudong, what do you think? Are you confident in your chances if you fight him?" The other person merely looked up silently as the surrounding students clenched their fists, gritting their teeth in dissatisfaction. Hudong beside him frowned and looked up to reply, not certain about anything. "This is Hudong, a martial arts talented person for the capital city in the 5th national competitive exam." He added, full of helplessness, "I just entered the 5th level, while that person has probably reached peak 5th level, even small successes." In front, the young man with blonde hair was still standing with his arms crossed, looking down at the crowd, emanating a murderous aura. Hudong confirmed, "I'm afraid I won't be able to withstand 3 of his moves. The result will be the same as Zhu Xiaoming's." Then, Hudong closed his eyes, helplessly frowned, and added, "If my elemental control could break through to level 3, then there might be a chance. But right now," he paused. Beside him, the young man with green hair was startled, furrowing his brow in astonishment, shouting, "What? Even you can't do it?" Immediately after, he reached out with another suggestion. "How about we take turns supporting you? As long as we exhaust his stamina, there will definitely be a chance." Upon hearing this, Hudong quickly opened his eyes, looked at his friend, and opposed. "This plan is not feasible." Then he explained further. "The vital signs of a peak 5th level martial artist are close to 1,000, and with the staunch spirit technique mastered, their stamina is extremely formidable." Next, he looked towards the person who was frowning, glancing at the bubble tea cup with a clogged straw in hand, scrunching his brows and pouting in annoyance while stirring. Furthermore, I could sense that the person standing there had not done anything yet, and even more dangerously, he seemed to have already reached the 6th level of Grandmaster. Upon hearing this, the people around quickly panicked and shouted. Behind them, a brown-haired person also wide-eyed shouted, "What? 6th level? Is he even a student?" Meanwhile, the green-haired friend also gasped, flailing his arms in panic, shouting in realization, "The president of the Martial Arts Association is only at the 6th level. Isn't this bullying?" Hearing the crowd below discussing, Kai King above also laughed loudly while looking down. "Ha ha!" The crowd quickly looked up at him in fear. Then he quickly spoke to remind those below. "Do you still not realize where you are right now?" Immediately after, he smirked maliciously, raising 3 fingers while looking down at the crowd, setting a rule. "If you want to come in here, the rule is very simple." He confirmed further, "If you can block 3 of my strikes, then you'll be allowed in. If you can block 5, then you can bring in a suitcase." Next, he stretched out his hand and looked down at the crowd below, stating, "I know you are all martial arts geniuses, the darlings of heaven, the talented ones among your peers." The people below looked up at him in fear. Ki King continued to affirm, "But here, the glory and honor you are so proud of are not worth a dime." Then his face darkened, his brows furrowed, his teeth clenched, and he held a handful of name tags, sneering as he confirmed, "Everything you want must be taken by your own hands and strength." After that, he added, "And those without strength." The name tags fell slowly from Kai King's hand. He continued, "Are worth nothing. They can only be ordinary people." Immediately after, he added scornfully, "Even unworthy of being a dog, a lowly insect." The crowd below stared at the pile of tags while looking at Kai King in fear. Then he laughed and raised his hand, a killing intent radiating around him, laughing maniacally as he declared, "As a senior student of the 7th Martial Saint, your esteemed senior, I will teach you your first lesson in enrollment." The crowd below fell silent, not daring to make a sound, filled with gloom. Below, the group of new students was so angry that they gritted their teeth in helplessness, pursing their lips and squinting up at the front. Then Lu Sheng frowned, pursed his lips in annoyance, and snickered to himself. "Ha ha! Why is this happening? Don't they get bored?" Next, he sighed deeply and voiced his thoughts. "Why do these pests appear wherever I go? talking nonsense about life principles and a bunch of jumble laws, yet their strength is as weak as a snail. He then questioned himself, how can they be so thick-skinned? Suddenly, Lindsay next to Lu Sheng clenched his fists, lowered his head, and muttered, so amazing. Hearing this, Lu Sheng looked at him in confusion. Immediately after, Lindsay enthusiastically laughed out loud. His eyes wide, he jumped up, pumped his fists, and shouted, that's awesome. Then he added, this is exactly the style I like the most. The scene where the senpai thinks he's justified in trampling others underfoot, enjoying their astonishment and horrified gazes. Shortly after, he again asked, ha ha, can we take 3 more hits? He quickly threw a pair of items to Lu Sheng and confirmed, watch how Grandpa teaches you nephew. Seeing Lindsay so excited, Lu Sheng stared wide-eyed, taking the items with a look of surprise. Next, he pointed at his face, his expression radiating a fierce aura, clenched his fists, and glanced at Lu Sheng to announce, hey bro, I forgot to tell you. Then he added, I am the champion of martial arts from Sichuan province this year, and I am ranked 9th in the country. Immediately, without waiting any longer, Lindsay quickly jumped up, his hands clenched into fists, showing a grin, and shouted in affirmation, what kind of ridiculous rules are those? Even entering the dorm is so much of a hassle. I'll teach you a lesson. The group turned their heads in astonishment to look at him, while Lu Sheng just stood there holding his bag looking lost. As expected, Lindsay was quickly knocked back, screaming in pain. Ah-oh! Rolling on the ground, the whole group, along with Lu Sheng, stared at him in confusion. Then Lu Sheng squatted down, holding his bag and looking at him, asking, are you okay? Lindsay was still scratching his head while sitting up, coughing. He then remarked, I underestimated him. I didn't expect that guy to be that strong, even having staunch spirit. The young man had just lowered his foot, still radiating a strong aura with his hands in his pockets, looking at them with a smug smile. Next, Lu Sheng quickly patted him on the shoulder, smiling and comforting, ha ha, it's all right, you did great. Meanwhile, Lindsay kept holding his head, closing his eyes dejectedly. Right after that, Lu Sheng confidently walked forward. The crowd quickly dispersed to make way for Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng spoke up to confirm, next, just watch me. Meanwhile, the person behind him sat on the ground, blankly watching Lu Sheng's figure advance. Immediately, he extended his hand in front of Kai King, who was still smiling smugly and inwardly concluding, that's right, I should have thought ahead that if I encounter something annoying, I need to resolve it immediately. Next, he rubbed his wrist with his other hand, making a sour face while smiling faintly, closing his eyes and stepping forward while radiating a fierce aura, internally affirming, if it gets noisy, just crush it. After that, he regained his composure, clenched his fist, and with his other hand holding onto the strap of his backpack, he looked up at Chai King with an indifferent expression and confirmed, go ahead and attack me. The surrounding students quickly began to discuss. He then quickly raised his hand to confirm, wait a minute. This made everyone look at him with confusion. Chai King's expression darkened as he pointed at Lu Sheng, furrowing his brow and squinting as he asked, are you planning to just take 3 hits from me? Hearing this, Lu Sheng seemed to recall something and looked back at the backpack he was wearing, casually saying, oh. He then dropped it to the ground. Next, he crossed his arms and pointed at Kai King, lifting his chin and frowning, and asked again, is it good now? Hearing that, Hu Dong on the other side also frowned in shock, furrowing his brows as he looked towards Lu Sheng and murmured his thoughts. This kid really underestimates life. That's a martial artist with staunch spirit and so arrogant at that. Next to him, his blue-haired friend also frowned, looking shocked as he wondered, if we provoke them, is there a chance we could get crippled? This young man should pray for himself. Seeing Lu Sheng disregard him, Kai King squinted and scowled, exuding a golden aura directed at Lu Sheng, licking his lips and speaking, I will make you understand. He interrupted, then raising one leg while extending his arms to the sides, his whole body emanating a dense atmosphere. He glared at Lu Sheng and yelled, what true brutality is? His leg kicked out, a surge of blazing red energy charging towards Lu Sheng with great force. The onlookers stared blankly at the sphere, gasping in amazement. This power. Their eyes widened. Wow. Lu Sheng, however, remained calm as he awaited the blow drawing closer to his face, his half of the face also darkening, his eyes steady without blinking as he prepared to accept it. Finally, Lu Sheng quickly leaped forward towards Kai King, catching him off guard. Next, Lu Sheng rushed to grab his neck, his fingers tightening, forcing Tai King's body to sway backward, his face scrunching as he yelled, ah, let me go, screaming in pain. Next, his body quickly slammed to the ground while the ground around him buckled and shattered. Below, a crowd of people panicked. Huodom's face darkened, his eyes bulging as he stared at Lu Sheng, sweat pouring down like rain, stepping back and yelling, "Holy shit, what?" A peak 5th level martial artist and a minor staunch spirit reduced to this. Beside him, the blue-haired friend also darkened his face, frowning in shock and stammering, unsure of what to say, having been struck in an instant. Finally, Lu Sheng stood up straight, releasing his grip on Kai King's neck, waving his wrist and glared at him, his body curled like a shrimp with his head buried in the ground, dust swirling around him. Behind, Lindsay trembled wide-eyed as he looked up at Lu Sheng, asking, can a staunch spirit really be crushed barehanded? Then he added, it seemed that the person inside was about to take action. The crowd around them began to discuss in hushed tones. Next, Lu Sheng approached the one sipping bubble tea. His face darkened, one hand crushing the bubble tea in his mouth, the other shoved into his pocket. After that, Lu Sheng brushed past him, eyeing him with killing intent and asking, can I leave now? The person on the other side pulled his mouth away from the straw, clenched the cup tightly, and confirmed darkly, fine. Next, Lu Sheng casually put his hands in his pockets and walked into the dormitory. He glanced around the inside. Immediately after, he shoved his rune card number 1 in, then looked at the empty rune cards beside him and thought to himself, are they trying to prevent me from taking the rune card? Then he took another rune card number 17 and decisively said to himself, I'll help you take it. So next, Lu Sheng stepped out the door and threw the card towards Lindsay. He quickly caught it. Lu Sheng urged, fat guy, let's go in together. Meanwhile, Kai King had managed to stagger and sit down on the steps. Outside, Lindsay raised the card, holding Lu Sheng's luggage with a big smile confirming, yeah, coming right now. Then he added, thanks, buddy. Nearby, there were murmurs of excitement. Whoa, I have to cling to him too. The people standing there were momentarily stunned for several seconds, while Lindsay happily added, I'll help you carry your backpack. The crowd watched Lindsay's figure in amazement, and the green-haired person grimaced and stuttered, and so it went. Huodong beside them rubbed his chin, furrowing his brows as he looked at the other person blocking the door and remarked, the long-haired guy really isn't doing anything. He then added, could it be that he feels he can't handle him? Soon after, Lindsay and Lu Sheng quickly stepped into the dormitory. Behind them, the long-haired guy swiftly took out his phone, glanced at Lu Sheng, frowned, and said mysteriously to the person on the other end, hello, Brother Chen. This year it seems there's someone really good coming to study. At the dormitory, sunlight shone on the large building in the area. Lu Sheng stood below, squinting and smiling, one hand on his hip, the other holding his backpack strap, smiling as he remarked, is this the place? This dormitory is much better than I imagined. Next to him, Lindsay also squinted, raising his hand to shield his forehead while looking around. Then, Lu Sheng looked at a nearby house, crossed his arms, and commented, so I got a whole one for myself. Lu Sheng confirmed that this house was slightly smaller than his new one, but the key point was that everything was free. Hearing this, Lindsay behind him quickly grimaced, his fingers trembling as he pointed at Lu Sheng in astonishment, wide-eyed and stating, that's where Ascending Dragon Martial Poinsettia is. He then confirmed with Lu Sheng, hey bro, could you be Lu Sheng? Immediately his eyes lit up as he looked at Lu Sheng, exclaiming in amazement, whoa. At his surprise, Lu Sheng glanced over, furrowing his brows in confusion and asked, what's wrong? Do I now look like him? Hearing this, Lindsay quickly rushed over, smiling widely, giving Lu Sheng a thumbs up while nodding continuously in agreement exactly like him. He then added, earlier when I got lost, I noticed you didn't look like an ordinary person, but I didn't expect it to be this impressive. Next, he closed his eyes and sighed, raising his hand to wipe away the tear he had tried to squeeze from the corner of his eye, and remarked, I initially thought that I was at least the top martial scholar of a province, but my first encounter was with you. Then he added, to avoid encountering monsters like you, I even deliberately registered at the 7th Martial Saint. After that, he scratched his head, furrowed his brow, and with difficulty, closed his eyes and voiced his thoughts. I think you will definitely go to learn from those martial saints, but I didn't expect you to be so formidable and come to the 7th Martial Saint. Seeing this, Lu Sheng squinted and looked at Lindsay with confusion, asking, why is that? Is the 7th Martial Saint very weak? Upon hearing this, he imagined and frowned, explaining, I have heard this from my family. If it were true, why would it be called the 7th Martial Saint? The Ascending Dragon Martial Poinsettia from previous years all registered at those Martial Saints. He recalled the overwhelming number of martial saints and then offered his own conclusion. I researched the National Martial Arts Tournament for students held each year, and the 7th Martial Saint usually ranks low, so it must be weak. He remembered that his school's ranking in the bottom social tier was 7th. Hearing this, Lu Sheng walked while putting his hands in his pockets, with the other hand holding his backpack, smiling and glancing at Lin Zi behind him. He thought, whether it's weak or not, it's all the martial arts legacy passed down from Martial Saint, enough for me to train. Then Lu Sheng said goodbye. All right, I still have things to do. We'll talk next time. Seeing this, the person behind him was also startled and looked at Lu Sheng. Right after that, he entered the house and closed the door. Outside, Lin Zi was still shouting back, "Hey buddy, let's add each other on WeChat." Meanwhile, Lu Sheng ignored the shouting and quickly sat down on the sofa in the living room, placing his backpack beside him and looking around. Next, he commented to himself in his thoughts. The arrangement inside wasn't bad. Even the sofa was made of strange creature leather. Everything that should be there was present. Then, Lu Sheng noticed a remote control on the table, quickly pointing at it with a confused frown. He asked, "What is this?" Immediately after, the TV screen in front of Lu Sheng turned on and voices came from it. Let's talk a bit about the tips to get through the 13th floor of the Martial Saint Tower. Kai Magnan tore apart a level 5 strange creature barehanded. Cautious people, please be careful. The list of influential figures in the Martial Saint ranking for this month made Lu Sheng look up and wonder, all ranked first. Next, Lu Sheng saw the information displayed on the bulletin board, some online viewing information, the profound battle of Xiao Nan, the complete battle video of the top-ranked senior student of Martial Saint's 7th level. Hearing the voice inside, Lu Sheng also looked up, momentarily surprised and wide-eyed as he realized there is even a school forum here, and there is quite a bit of information available. Next, Lu Sheng added, from the comments, it's clear that these two are the strongest among the senior students who have not yet graduated from Martial Saint level 7. Finally, he stated, let's see how skilled they are. Immediately after, he watched the video on the screen in front of him. Two people, one wielding a sword, fighting against another with a saber. The commentaries rang out, boss challenges the immoral phoenix, then followed a fiery exchange, culminating in the intense clash of sword and saber. Next, an announcement sounded and the screen froze. The 15-second trial had come to an end. Please subscribe and then pay points to continue watching. Faced with this exploitation, Lu Sheng squinted in annoyance, looked up with a sneer and shouted, damn indeed, the videos online in this world all share this shameless style. Next, Lu Sheng added another observation. I don't even know what the current number of students in my program is, so I essentially can't register for an account. Then Lu Sheng stood up, resting his hands on his hips as he looked out the window and remarked, forget it, I'll figure it out later. With some free time and nothing to do, Lu Sheng decided to practice the Great Sun visualization technique for a bit. Shortly after, Lu Sheng thought, that little open-air rooftop seems pretty good. Immediately after that, Lu Sheng opened his bag, revealing a pile of yellow solution vials and internally noted, before coming here, I prepared 30 vials of this golden dragon elixir. It should be enough for cultivation. Next, Lu Sheng quickly used them, and the aura around him rapidly thickened and enveloped him. Lu Sheng looked at his body, moved his joints, and concluded to himself that the effect was certainly much better than those other things when he cultivated. However, outside, there was a loud banging that shattered Lu Sheng's thoughts. Hearing this, Lu Sheng's face darkened, his eyes filled with killing intent. He furrowed his brow, glancing at the door, shouting, who is it? There was no response from the other side, only the increasingly loud and violent banging continued. Bang, bang, bang. Then, Lu Sheng quickly approached and opened the door, his face twisted in discomfort, stepping outside to ask the group of people, who's banging on the door? In front of Lu Sheng, a young man with red hair and his lackeys frowned, visibly irritated, and replied, it's me. Then, with a sullen expression, he spoke with a scowl, are you Lu? Before he could finish his sentence, Lu Sheng's anger flared, and he frowned. Glaring at him, his hands clenched as he swung out, using his strength to kick towards the young man's stomach. Immediately, he was sent crashing repeatedly against the corner wall, producing loud noises. The two lackeys were also sweating. One was wide-eyed in disbelief, looking at Lu Sheng, while the other was too stunned to react, his expression vacant. In the distance, the arrogant young man was now face down in the dust. Lu Sheng's face was filled with disgust as he frowned and glared at them, exuding an aura of hostility as he spoke up. Go back and learn how to nod politely, then come find me. The young man sat up through the dust, coughing heavily. The other younger members finally reacted and turned to look at their leader, while Lu Sheng remained still, watching them. The young man quickly hugged his chest, his face contorted in pain as he struggled to catch his breath and inwardly cursed. Dan. Next, he also wondered to himself, hasn't Lu Sheng just enrolled? How can he be this strong? Before they could fully comprehend, Lu Sheng asked, so, what is your purpose in coming here? Is it just to cause trouble as usual? Who's next? Right after that, they presented a student ID along with a box of items in hand. Next, they smiled broadly at Lu Sheng and graciously denied, no, it's a misunderstanding. We're the ones handling the procedures for that student. This is your student ID, and it has already linked you to the key card for this villa. Then the person behind added to the box they were holding and even gifted a box of daily necessities. The person in front holding the ID further explained, with this ID, you can use all the equipment in Marshall Saint's 7th, and each month you'll also receive a 4th level exotic blood. Hearing this, Lu Sheng reached out to take it, looking at the ID, frowning and murmuring to himself, I can still receive a vial of 4th level exotic blood every month. Next, he commented to himself, the benefits of Marshall Saint are indeed extraordinary. Immediately, Lu Sheng glanced at the one who had been knocked back. He was struggling to sit up, his face contorted as he glared at Lu Sheng through the dust. Lu Sheng concluded, Put, if this is what they came here for, I don't believe it. Finally, he confirmed further, with such a hostile attitude, it seems that this is the school staff trying to assert their power in front of newcomers. Thinking this, he began to exude killing intent towards them, tilting his head and glaring as he asked, What do you want? Are you waiting for me to apologize to you? The 3 young men quickly started in shock. The one sitting on the ground trembled and shouted, Hey, no need, no meat, we'll leave right away. Without letting them say more, Lu Sheng slammed the door shut and left behind a sentence, I have received the item already, thank you for making the trip, take your time leaving. The 2 younger subordinates outside closed their eyes, bowed their heads, and sighed in relief. Then they went to help their boss stand up from behind. The young man, still trembling with anger as he got up, gritted his teeth and said, Dan, how unlucky. The young man in the blue shirt commented, as an old student, he was beaten to this state by a newbie who had just enrolled. Hearing this, the guy in the orange shirt looked at the leader and confirmed, So what? You want revenge? I'm not going with you. Upon hearing this, the beaten young man's face scrunched up. He still hugged his chest, panting and frowned while shouting, What the hell do you mean by revenge? The last time we went on a mission to deal with a 6th level strange creature, I wasn't injured this badly. Then he muttered, But this matter can't just end like this. Next time, before he could finish speaking, Lu Sheng cracked open the door and shot a fierce glance at them, asking, Oh, not leaving yet? Hearing this, the group outside trembled in fear and looked over. Lu Sheng's cold gaze peeked through the crack in the door as he asked them, Is there anything else you've forgotten? He then emphasized, Senior. Hearing this, the young man in the blue shirt inside lost his composure and stared at Lu Sheng, exclaiming, No. The young man who had been beaten was so frightened he jumped up and looked at Lu Sheng, awkwardly smiling and panicking as he explained, Oh, right, and forgot to fix the door for you. The remaining young man quickly panicked. His face scrunched up as he sweated and held his phone to his face, seriously shouting, Hello, cleaning department of the school, emergency situation, send an ambulance. Send someone here to help me. He added something related to the matter of human life. After that, Lu Sheng paid them no mind and quickly went inside to sit on the chair in front of the TV. Lu Sheng picked up the remote and remarked, I got the card, so I should be able to continue watching the video. The screen soon resumed playing. Seeing this, Lu Sheng could not help but sigh inwardly. All right then. In front of Lu Sheng was Chen Yi-Xuan wearing a suit, one hand holding a saber, the other elegantly placed behind his back, eyes closed. The screen displayed the most notable comments. Marshall Saint No. 7. Brother Yi-Xuan number 1. Do you understand the value of being ranked first among the old students? Upon seeing him, Lu Sheng also remarked in his thoughts, Is this the current number 1 ranked of Marshall Saint No. 7? He then commented inwardly, wearing a suit while fighting. Just return the result, no explanation needed, nothing else. Immediately after, the screen shifts to a muscular man wielding a large knife over his shoulder. Seeing this person, Lu Sheng recognizes that this is Xiao Nan. He then comments, these two represent the strength of the highest level martial arts geniuses in the top martial arts hall of Dragon Nation. Finally, Lu Sheng murmurs, I wonder what their true strength is. Suddenly, the screen lights up and Lu Sheng watches the match with wide eyes, a bit astonished. Inside, Xiao Nan is bending forward, swinging his large knife with a golden aura towards Chen Yi-Xuan, who rushes up with a green aura and a sword in hand. The scene switches to Xiao Nan standing on the ground, swinging his knife, causing the ground beneath him to sink in a patch. Above, Chen Yi-Xuan quickly swings his sword down, their strikes meeting in a flash, creating a brief spark of light. Xiao Nan is struggling to push his knife against Chen Yi-Xuan's sword, his face contorted and veins popping. Soon after, he scoffs, glaring at Xiao Nan while still pressing down on the sword. Outside the screen, Lu Sheng watches them fight, astonished, and screams inwardly. Such strength is very powerful. Then he gazes blankly at his 6 fingers, thinking to himself, if I didn't have the guidance of a master, I'm afraid. Lu Sheng pauses for a moment and then calculates absent-mindedly. It must take 60%, no, 50% of my power to defeat them. After that, Lu Sheng left his thoughts and looked at the chaotic match on the screen, commenting, this is already very exaggerated. I am currently at the minor stage of staunch spirit. My battle power can casually exceed 2 million. He then confirmed further, 50% of my strength must be over 1 million. Inside the screen, Chen Yi Swan was smiling and waving at everyone, sheathed her sword after winning the match, and the audience began to cheer. Lu Sheng confirmed further, that's why both of these people have not yet reached the master level, but already possess the battle power of a master. They are truly geniuses. Next, Lu Sheng clasped his hands, closed his eyes, and bowed his head with a smile, adding, this is also the 7th martial saint, along with the martial saint ranking. In the end, I conclude that there are indeed many geniuses in the world, and I need to work much harder. Immediately after, the video on the screen transitioned to the freshman dormitory entrance match. Seeing the images of Lindsay and himself, the martial saint also let out a confused hum. Inside, the commentary rang out. The strongest freshman in the history of the 7th martial saint. On the first day of school, he defeated a top 300 expert from the old student ranking. Then, the image of the martial saint rushed toward Kai King, hesitating to comment. Is this in front of the dormitory? He then confirmed, it has been captured by someone. Immediately afterwards, there was an image of Lu Sheng grabbing his opponent's neck and slamming him to the ground violently. The martial saint, witnessing his own actions, couldn't help but make a bit of judgment. It seems I've been a bit too violent. Suddenly, the screen shifted to a warning that made Lu Sheng explain as he read, the following contains violent images, do not imitate. Lu Sheng held Kai King by the neck, repeatedly slamming him down on the ground, rendering him unable to fight back. The screen quickly displayed popular comments. 2,333,333. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. This new student is quite fierce. Indeed, one should not provoke ascending dragon, everyone. Seeing their comments, Lu Sheng could only sigh. Eventually, he raised a hand to scratch his face, squinted his eyes, and self-reproachfully remarked, well, it seems that guy won't be able to hold his head high in school for a long time. I feel a bit guilty. Next, Lu Sheng's stomach growled. Seeing this, he rubbed his belly and murmured, I'm so hungry, I need to eat first. He then made a decision. Let's check out the cafeteria while I'm at it. In the bustling cafeteria, groups of students sat together, noisy and crowded. Lindsay was carrying a pile of food and walked towards Lu Sheng. His face was filled with shyness as he smiled and spoke first. Hey, Sheng, don't laugh at me. He continued to explain, I ate a bit too much, otherwise I won't have the stamina during training. As soon as he saw the mountain of food on Lu Sheng's dining table, he widened his eyes and let out a gasp of surprise. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng was trying to open his mouth wide to swallow the 10-layer hamburger in front of him. Seeing this, Lindsay felt a bit embarrassed, put the food on the table, bent over awkwardly, and exclaimed, Brother Sheng is too scary, you are impressive. Hearing this, Lu Sheng chewed with a full mouth while looking at him in confusion. Nearby, the noisy chatter of female students about Lu Sheng quickly reached their ears. Hey, that's Lu Sheng, the strongest new student, right? He seems quite handsome. A girl next to her glanced at Lu Sheng and covered her mouth to add, but don't be fooled by how polite and refined he looks. Once provoked, he can be quite ruthless. But I like that. Next to them, Lindsay also turned to look at them, while Lu Sheng still appeared very polite in their eyes. In the eyes of the boys, Lu Sheng was devouring his food like a hungry tiger. Their faces darkened, and their glances were filled with scrutiny as they asked each other, did Kai King get beaten up by that kid? He's going to be a 6th year soon. Someone beside them added, probably just a mistake. Another person responded, I also want to test the strength of the strongest ascending dragon. Haha, me too. Seeing this, Lindsay looked around with wide eyes and commented, oh wow, Brother Sheng, do you hear that? It's only the first day of school and you've already become famous in the school. Then he regretfully said, haha, if I were as strong as you, that would be great. Opposite him, Lu Sheng raised a cup of water, closed his eyes, bowed his head to prepare to drink, and replied, Lindsay, that's not necessarily a good thing. Quickly and annoyingly, a hand knocked on the table. Lu Sheng heard the voice say, excuse me. Seeing that, Lu Sheng looked at him, one hand still holding a piece of meat, the other bringing a cup of water to his mouth. A group of people surrounded Lu Sheng. The leading young man raised his hand and looked at Lu Sheng, smiling as he asked, you are Lu Sheng, right? Then he added, nice to meet you. He wore a look of self-satisfaction, extending his hand while Lu Sheng simply gazed up in silence. Next, he tilted his head, closed his eyes, and smiled lightly as he introduced himself. I am Wu Fan, this year's martial arts champion of Yuhe province, ranked 7th in the national competitive exam. Before he could finish, as Lu Sheng raised a forkful of noodles to his mouth, he closed his eyes and indifferently interrupted, asking, "So what? Are you here to tell me about your accomplishments?" Wu Fan's arm froze in midair. Beside him, a shaved head guy, seeing Lu Sheng's arrogant demeanor, frowned and grit his teeth in anger, shouting, "Damn it." His body began to move closer. Wu Fan quickly closed his eyes and smiled, raising his hand to stop him while saying, "Oh." Next, he reached out his hand and the 4 people stood in front of Lu Sheng's dining table. Wu Fan spoke up to confirm, "Lu Sheng, I know your strength is very strong. I am not your opponent." Then he added, "But this isn't a high school and interaction between people is very important." Next, he smiled at him and added, "So." Before Wu Fan could finish speaking, Lu Sheng leaned forward and interrupted, "If you know you're not my opponent, then why provoke me?" On the other side, the people listening looked at Lu Sheng awkwardly. Lu Sheng was taking an old plate of food while continuously warning them as he moved the finished plate away, knowing well that there are some things not to do and some people not to mess with, yet being stubborn. What could one say? Lu Sheng interrupted. Immediately afterward, he propped his hands on the table, stood up, and questioned them. "Do you have a problem with your brain?" Beside him, Wu Fan and his gang felt a bit scared upon seeing Lu Sheng's attitude, stepping back with wide eyes. Feeling insulted, he frowned, his eyes wide in anger as he shouted, "Die!" He swung his fist towards Lu Sheng, his face tight with fury. Lu Sheng, seeing this, simply waved his arm lightly towards him, prompting Wu Fan to throw a punch back. Immediately afterward, Lu Sheng held his face. He stared wide-eyed in panic and thought, "Damn, this scene seems familiar." He interrupted himself. Then his inner voice began to scream, "Oh right, it's the scene from that video." But before he could collect himself, Lu Sheng slammed his fist down on the table, causing the dishes to shatter. After that, Lu Sheng lifted his head off the sunken ground while growling each word. "I told you so." The young man struggled, unable to react in time. Next, Lu Sheng slammed his head down again, making the entire hall tremble in fear. Lu Sheng shouted, "Don't." Immediately afterward, he yanked his head up. Tears streamed down Wu Fan's face in despair. Lu Sheng shouted a warning, "Don't disturb me." In response to this situation, the crowd quickly erupted. Some pulled out cameras while others watched in wide-eyed amazement. Lindsay nearby was so excited that he clenched his fists, his eyes sparkling as he thought to himself, "The monster is back." Then Lu Sheng quickly grabbed a tissue from the table to wipe Wu Fan's tears and snot with his hand, while Wu Fan lay crumpled on the ground. Soon after, Lu Sheng bent down, still unable to clean up, closed his eyes in annoyance, and sighed. On the ground, Wu Fan lay unconscious amid the wreckage, the table broken in 2, with food juices continually flowing down his face. Next, Lu Sheng tossed the piece of paper into Wu Fan's gaping mouth, causing his face to spin in confusion. Lu Sheng angrily emphasized each word. "In my life, I hate 2 things the most." Then he paused. Lu Sheng pointed his thumb toward himself, his eyes flashing with a fierce light, leaning his head slightly as he added, "One is being disturbed while I'm cultivating." Then he pointed at the disheveled Wu Fan lying unconscious on the ground and confirmed, "2 is seeing flies buzzing in front of me while I'm eating." The 2 henchmen beside him trembled, clinging to each other in fear in front of Lu Sheng. Next, Lu Sheng warned them, "So next time, don't disturb me during these 2 times." He then pointed at the 2 men huddled together, his eyes flashing with anger as he frowned and glared at them, asking, "Got it?" The 2 young men quickly clasped their hands, feeling embarrassed and scared, bowing as they shouted, "Yes, we understand now." The young man beside him also confirmed with a pale face, "We won't show up in front of you anymore." Hearing this, Lu Sheng calmed down and reminded them, "Very good, when he wakes up, call him to compensate for the table." Next, Lu Sheng turned and left, not forgetting to glance at Lindsay and called him over, "Lindsay, let's go." Hearing this, he eagerly ran towards Lu Sheng with a beaming smile, affirming, "Up, brother Sheng." They left behind a commotion of noisy chatter. As they walked, Lindsay stood next to Lu Sheng, clenching his fists tightly, furrowing his brows and shaking with excitement as he exclaimed, "Whoa, Sheng, what you just did was really..." He interrupted himself and shouted, "So impressive." Then he went on to state that men should behave like that. "If you're not convinced, just throw a punch." Lindsay followed Lu Sheng, praising him nonstop. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng noticed the cold, piercing looks directed at him, eyes that seemed eager to test him. He confirmed in his mind that martial arts is a path of competition, especially here at the martial sake training ground. home to the most talented martial artists in the country. The group behind him continued to glare at Lu Sheng, their brows furrowed in anger. Lu Sheng thought to himself, what's most abundant here are idiots with heads full of iron just like earlier. Another group was sneering and mockingly laughing, glancing toward Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng interrupted and commented, as if flies were incessantly bothering others. He then remembered the image of Mu Fan, like a fly with a lewd grin, rubbing his hands while hovering around him. Next, Lu Sheng added, the main issue is that they're still not scared enough. He looked back at the group behind him, narrowing his eyes and exuding a chilling aura as he confirmed in his mind, if a master stood before them, would they still act the same way? They wouldn't. Immediately after, Lu Sheng further stated that what he needed to do was instill fear in them. The annoying flies would disappear on their own. Then Lu Sheng shouted to affirm, I need to find an opportunity. Right after that, he imagined his figure being exaggerated, looming over the round, terrified faces of the crowd, screaming internally to beat them until their guts were shattered and their heads were cut off. I will transform into a giant demon and trample them underfoot, surrounded by fire and smoke. I will calmly gaze down at them below, then internally conclude, admiring myself like a nightmare, fearing me like a god. Lu Sheng's bare body revealed clear sinewy lines, his hands raised, his face darkened, a halo of divinity appearing behind him, radiating a brilliant golden light around him. Returning to reality, an angry voice forcefully called Lu Sheng out of his thoughts. Lu Sheng! Lu Sheng! Then that person quickly approached Lu Sheng, fists clenched with a murderous aura, exuding immense energy. Lu Sheng also sensed it and glanced back, pursing his lips, subconsciously emanating a killing intent while internally assessing. This person is very strong but remains calm. Soon after, the other person smiled and extended a hand toward him in a friendly manner, speaking to introduce himself. You are Lu Sheng, right? I am the vice principal, Zhao Taiyan. He then added, I came to look for you regarding something. Tomorrow you have to go on stage to give a speech representing the new students. Hearing that, Lin Zi behind him widened his eyes in confusion and asked, going to the podium to speak. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng in front frowned and crossed his arms, looking at Zhao Taiyan with suspicion. Upon hearing Lin Zi's question, he looked towards Lu Sheng and explained further. Actually, you just need to say a few simple words, nothing special. Hearing this, Lu Sheng was also excited, relaxed his facial muscles, smiled, and confirmed, all right, I will prepare. Next to him, Lin Zi, seeing this, widened his eyes and reminded Lu Sheng, oh my, that's great. This is an opportunity to stand out in front of all the new students. Then he shouted excitedly, Brother Sheng, make sure to perform well. Lu Sheng turned to him, his expression calm and smiled while asking back, standing out in front of all the new students, you're absolutely right. I must perform well. The next day in the auditorium, a crowd quickly gathered in the large open-air hall. The stage was empty, and the students gradually filled the vacant seats. Above the red curtain in front of the stage hung the words 57 freshman enrollment ceremony of the Martial Saint No 7. Then the crowd quickly turned their heads to look at Lu Sheng and exclaimed, Lu Sheng is here. He was the one who knocked Wu Fein out yesterday, right? Lu Sheng sat next to Lin Zi. All the disapproving glances were directed at Lu Sheng, but he remained calm, looking straight ahead with an indifferent expression. Meanwhile, Lin Zi sat behind, glancing around awkwardly. The blue-haired guy from orientation furrowed his brow and looked at Lu Sheng, calling out to his friend beside him. Hugong, Lu Sheng is here, then added, I heard he's going to give a speech on the podium today. Next to him, Hudong tilted his head and squinted at Lu Sheng with curiosity. The blue-haired friend posed the question. Suji and Fai, that guy seems to be looking for trouble, wanting to take down Lu Sheng. What do you think? Seeing this, he also propped his chin up with his hand, furrowing his brow and turning his head, saying, Su Jianfi, I remember he ranked top 20 nationwide. He looked at Su Jianfi, who was watching Lu Sheng. He had his arms crossed, a scowl on his face. Lu Sheng noticed and turned to look at him as well. Above, the crowd had their arms crossed, watching Lu Sheng for some entertainment. Behind, Hudong continued to make observations. Has he become the dark overlord in the eyes of the new students? Meanwhile, Lu Sheng quickly got up from his seat, holding his head high, one hand in his pocket, and calmly walked toward the podium.